Ya Ali Madad, and welcome everyone to this Zoom session of September 1st, 2020 at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Today, we have a special session on questions and answers, during which Dr. HASSAM will be addressing some of the questions which we have received through your correspondence, and he will also be taking some live questions from our participants here tonight. So let's begin, starting first with a Ginan recitation by Shirin. Shirin?
Bismillah. Sami ji ame unya chari tame bakshana haram ya maula ame gunegar chaye ananta aparam sami ji ame na kuch gata tamari aaye ya maula ame gunegar jiva lagiye tamare paaye sami ji ame na kuch tame tribhovar kirata ya maula tamathi antakrora jiva utare param જેમ તમે સામી બત્રીસ દાત વચ્ચે જીવા રાખી saram ya maula tem amne lejo ugar
Kayempaya. Thank you, Shirin. That was lovely. Dr. HASSAM, if you would, please.
Yali Madad, everyone. Yali Madad Faiza.
Alali Madad.
Yali Madad to all the co-hosts. Much gratitude for you being there. Special gratitude to Shirin Bhai for those lovely verses of the Ginans. And as you know, Ginans are very special in our tariqah because our beloved Imam holds them in enormous prestige and highness in the practice of our faith. What is important always to remember, my dear brothers and sisters, is that in listening to the Holy Ginans, remember, this is an opportunity for spiritual understanding of the higher wisdom, and it is a channel of intellectual illumination. It is a channel of that kind of knowledge. When we listen with love and affection and faith, then it creates its impact and it creates its magic. The whole purpose of knowledge in our tariqah, it's intended not only for material well-being and material gain and material knowledge, which is enormously important today, but more so it is for the illumination, to bring light into the intellect, so that through that illumination of the intellect, through knowledge, the soul can be elevated. And this is an opportunity for me to add some footnotes, excuse me, and some comments to the notion of illumination. When I say intellectual illumination, I hope that you can make the connection in your own mind and in your own heart by realizing the fact that the intellect can only be illuminated in that sense of the term, provided what comes into it is light or illumination. You cannot illuminate the intellect by something that is not luminous. That's why knowledge also has stages. And the sacred knowledge that we have in our holy Ginans, and by extension, as I always like to say, in the compositions of our Qasidas and Munajats and Mankabats and Masnavis, they contain that spiritual understanding. They contain that sense of gnosis, meaning higher spiritual wisdom, which then brings that light in our consciousness and hence into our intellect. And remember that you can listen to Ginans at any time. When you go to sleep, in the morning, if you are home, you can have your cassette or CDs or USBs or YouTubes played in the background. And you can enrich yourself by the continuous listening and seeking to probe and understand what message the Ginan seeks to convey. Always remember, when it comes to our Hakikati Satpanti Dharam, and always use this traditional word because the word Dharam is very special to us in a sense. It's an all-encompassing word that speaks not only about our religious duties, but it is holistic in the nature in which we like to look at our faith, because it addresses the notion of body, mind, and spirit holistically. So our sacred Ginans are of such nature that they have been composed with specific messages, not necessarily in one particular Ginan, meaning one Ginan may have multiple messages, depending on how the holy peers of that time and the purpose for which they composed and declared and sung those ginans for our elevation and our illumination. So it is fundamentally important because our beloved Imam has very strongly emphasized decades after decades in different places that this is a tradition that is so unique. It is to be maintained and to be kept for generations yet to be born. And with all of that, our beloved Imam has very strongly emphasized that we must understand these ginans and carry their meanings in our heart. Think about this. Why the heart? Because the heart is the meeting point between the celestial and the terrestrial. And it is through the illumination of the heart where the spirit resides that we are able to illuminate the intellect. So since we are into a special session today, I'm just taking the opportunity at this moment to say a few more things related to forthcoming seminars. And there will be a continuation in separate blocks about very many different type of ginans that we will, inshallah, with Mawla's mercy and Mawla's blessing, study together and seek to understand those meanings and seek to understand them in the context in which we live today and explore and understand the spiritual wisdom, the higher spiritual knowledge that our Ginan gives us and what our holy peers declare to us about the notion of our soul and how this knowledge, like our beloved Imam said, knowledge first, action later. So this knowledge is so important, and we need to see how this knowledge is so relevant even in today's highly technological and scientific context. And inshallah, it will be my humble effort with the help of others to bring this to you into this context. And before we get into the session of the questions and answers, I'd like to remind everyone that every now and then I have made reference to the Holy Constitution. I say holy because the old Constitution had the name holy in it, but the Constitution of the Shia Imami Ismaili Muslims. And you know, I have to say this to you, that please take time every now and then, if nothing else, at least read the preamble of the Constitution. Read it over and over and over again, and read it in such a manner that you gradually absorb and master the language of the preamble of the Constitution. Our Constitution, the preamble, is such a marvelous document, important document, that it will give you an infinite understanding of the manner in which our tariqah is integrated holistically in the context of Islam and the principles that our tariqah expresses that are in total communion and harmony with the Islamic and particularly within Islam, the Shia principles. So in that context, I want to read to you the paragraph B of the Constitution that says, in accordance with Shia doctrine, tradition, and interpretation of history, the Holy Prophet ﷺ designated and appointed his cousin and son-in-law Hazrat Maulana Ali Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi salam to be the first Imam to continue the ta'wil and ta'lim of Allah's final message, and to guide the murids and proclaim that the imamat should continue by heredity through Hazrat Maulana Ali alayhi salam and his daughter Hazrat Bibi Fatima Zahra Khatun Jannat alayhi salam. They say salawat. So this was paragraph B of the Constitution, and this paragraph truly puts into perspective and explains the role and function of what our beloved Imam does for the Jamaat in the context of our tariqah, and what the Holy Prophet had declared during his time about the Holy Imamat. This is very important because many people get questioned, and this is what I have been told, and I do get many information and messages from many of you who basically say, how do we respond as to who we are? And I keep saying, look at the preamble of the Constitution. And of course, Maulana Bapa's own speeches. Maulana Bapa's speeches is a total education. Look at Maulana Bapa's speeches in the various sites that exist, and there are some independent sites. Now, one of them that I vividly remember, that was the Nano Wisdom site that had beautiful extract and articulation of those speeches. They made the speeches available, and it was accessible to everyone. And look at those speeches, because when you read Maulana Bapa's speeches, Maulana Bapa's articulation, explanation, Maulana Bapa's presentation is always within the context of the society, people, and the Jamaat that we live in. And at the same time, Maulana Bapa's speeches provide us an amazing form of analysis and the way in which we learn the vocabulary, we learn the language, we learn the articulation within that language of the elements of that knowledge, of that information that our beloved Imam is presenting before various audiences. Of course, it may be an academic audience like in various universities. It can be within the context of civil society. It can be in the context of pluralism. It can be in the context of education, architecture, and the multifarious fields that our beloved Imam constantly engages himself in when he is invited and when he presents it to the world at large, various perspectives that are fundamentally, and I underline the word fundamentally important for us, the Jamaat, the Murids, to understand. And these messages need to be looked at deeply, sincerely, intellectually, honestly, and seek it to understand it and learn from it. And you will find that it will infinitely enrich you about things that you never thought you would learn in your life. I will also add that whatever our beloved Imam has said into the speeches throughout his holy imamat to the world at large, as I said, it is an education in itself. It's intellectual illumination. And as a result of that, we are far wiser today than we were ever before in understanding holistically the global, societal, tariqah, and Islamic context of many issues that our beloved Imam has taken the time, the pain, and the opportunities to actually come forward and tell us and educate us about it. So do not miss out on this education. Read, reread, learn, learn more, increase your learning. Look at Maulana Bapa's language, as I've said, his analysis of issues, and how Maulana Bapa speaks to those aspects, because truly it is an education for mankind, not only for us, for the whole of mankind. And you know why I'm saying that. Well, here we are. These are a basic message I wanted to say this evening. May I now ask the host, back to you. And it is Sharon today, our host. Sharon, welcome and very pleased to have you. And I would like, if I may, ask you to introduce yourself with a few words to the listeners today. And in particular, I would request you, if you like, to tell our listeners in your engagement into holistic health that you are in, and which is something of special interest to me too. And that's why I'm motivated to tell you that.
Thank you for that, Dr. Hashim. My name is Sharon Nurani. I am from Dallas. And as Dr. Hassam mentioned, I'm very into the spiritual batin aspects of our faith. And learning with the work of Dr. Hashim has allowed me to go deeper. And so I'm super excited to be able to be a part of this. And so we have a few questions. And so we're going to go ahead and deep dive. The first question for today is going to go back into the Ginans, just to tie that up. A question we had was, can you comment on the relationship with the written Quran and the Ginans, and whether we can consider them both at the same level as they are both from Nur?
Most appropriate. Thank you. Yes. So the notion of the Ginans with the Quran is a very important one. Let me come back to give you a further explanation. But first, I would like you to, so we can be on the same page, look at what our beloved Imams have taught us regarding the various aspects of Ginans. So the messages, particularly from Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah alayhi salam, during his holy imamat, who has said to us and taught us the whole notion of Ginans. So I'm going to read you different pieces of the message, and then we can tie it up together. So in one of the messages, our beloved Imam has said, and I'm quoting, he said, study the philosophy of Das Avtar and interpret it according to the Islamic principles. Preach about the Nur, which existed before creation. During the Imamat of Islam Shah, Pir Sadruddin explained this to you. Preach accordingly. So this first message, there are at least three things in there. The first thing is, our beloved Imam says to us, well, study the philosophy of Das Avtar. What is Das Avtar? I know that's not a question, but there is something in this question that's related to the question. So we will leave the Das Avtar part for now. And then he says, is of course expressing about the philosophy of Das Avtar, and he says, interpret it according to Islamic principles. And then he gives the hint by saying, he says, preach about Nur, which existed before the creation. This is the key point. So our beloved Imam says that talk about Nur. And you know that in almost all my presentation, I have always insisted and continue to insist, as I will do today throughout our Q&A session, that our tariqah has a very special interpretation and meaning of the word Nur. And in Ismaili Satpant Dharam. The whole idea of Satpant, meaning the Sirat al-Mustaqim, is the path of Nur. So bear this in mind because it relates to the question being asked. And of course, this message says that during the imamat of Imam Islam Shah alayhi salam, that Pir Sadruddin explained it to us. And the Imam is guiding us and says, well, you know, preach accordingly, because that is a perfect example how you should be explaining it. And we will do so in some of the very near future seminars, because these subjects are quite elaborate. They have lots of details, lots of mechanics behind it, and we need to be at the appropriate segment to be able to do that. Further than that, the other messages the Imams have given us is to say that he said, if you follow the Ginans, you will get barakat in this world, and your akhirat, meaning your hereafter, the life hereafter, will be good too. Again, a very powerful message. So if you follow the Ginans, the Imam says, you will get barakat. You know what is the meaning of barakat? It's a blessing. It's a blessing that only comes from heaven. And in accordance with the interpretation and meaning of our tariqah, this barakat, the source of the barakat is the Imam. And it is Maulana Bapa himself who can grant and give this barakat. And therefore, following the Ginan is also an insurance, if you like, for the hereafter, because it is that knowledge that gives us this illumination and understanding. The other message is, the Imam gave saying, he says, saying your dua, and the recitation of Ginans are a gift of akhirat. There it is. Can you tie these 2 points together? He says, saying your dua, the 3 dua that we recite, and the recitation of Ginan is a gift of akhirat. Akhirat meaning hereafter, meaning a gift from heaven. I hope you understand that. Then he goes on further to say, Ginans are the tafsir. Tafsir meaning an in-depth interpretation, an in-depth meaning of the Quran. Now this closely relates to the question being asked. I'll come back to it in a second. And then the Imam says, sing Ginans which are full of nur. Sorry, this is a Ginan of a verse of Pir Sadruddin. He says, sing the Ginans that are full of nur in such a way that your heart may overflow with bliss. And I spoke about bliss in one of my last lectures. And this bliss is tied to this notion of how when the intellect is illuminated and the soul overflow with that bliss. Now, coming back to a couple of other messages the Imam gave, look what he says. He said that Pir Sadruddin came to you from far away, and after a great struggle brought you into the fold of this Satpant. You had no knowledge of this faith, of this religion, because you were Hindus. Of course, this is referred to our forefathers, our ancestors of the past. He preached and introduced this Satpant to your ancestors. Now you are following the faith of your forefathers. Rings a bell? Now you are following the faith of your forefathers. And our beloved Imam says, keep it. It is the same path that Pir Sadruddin had shown to them. Are you getting a clue? The faith of our forefathers was the very one that Holy Pir Sadaddin showed to our forefathers. So here we have a clue that if we study Pir Sadaddin and the Ginans of Pir Sadaddin, and of course the Ginans of other Pirs within the tradition, we will get knowledge, understanding what was the path of our forefathers. I think you already know. But to put it simply, going back to one of those messages, that it is the path of Nur. That was the faith of our forefathers. They always honored and they always cherished, served, prostrated in humility, and rendered themselves completely and totally submissive to the Holy Nur. Now, there are other messages, perhaps this one here, relevant to the question. The Imam's message was, Pir Sadaddin interpreted the Quran in Ginans, which were composed in the language of India. So Pir Sadaddin composed and interpreted in the Ginans the Quran. So the question was, let me get my sheet so I don't get Sharon to repeat it. The question was, you'll have to help me, Sharon. I have lost my thing there.
Sure. The question was, can you comment on the relationship of the Qurans and the Ginans, and whether, since they come from Nur, if they can hold the same?
Yes. Now, I'd like you to use a bit of logic. If you go back to, very quickly, just to the time when I explained to you that Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he is the Nur. He is also our first Pir. And it was Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam through whom the Holy Quran came to humanity. I think we all agree on that. And I have read you the paragraph B of that constitution that speaks about the final message of Allah to mankind. Now, think about it logically. And this is actually a very important question indeed. If Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the Nur of Nabuwat and the Nur of Panchtan Pak also, and this same Nur, I underline the word same, the same Nur came into the lineage of our holy Pirs. And which Pirs? The Pirs that were appointed by the Imams of that time to fulfill the specific function of the office of the Pir, and the Pirs being the ones who are the highest in creations. Remember that. So it was the same Nur that brought the Holy Quran. It is the same Nur that brought our Ginans. The difference is, amongst many other aspects, which we will be coming down the road with other questions, that the Ginans are giving the interpretation of the Quran in a language that our ancestors understood, and by extension, the generations that followed within that subcontinent, and eventually our forefathers and now. So can you make that connection? Can you see the logic if you keep the word Nur in the lineage? So it is from the Nur it came the Holy Quran. It is from the Nur also came the meaning of the Quran, which was then put into the Ginan in its multifarious forms of messages, ragas, languages, interpretation, and meaning. And there is, I have always said before, there is an ocean of knowledge to be conquered into this body of high spiritual knowledge that we call the Gnans. So there we are. I hope that this gives you some perspective to the question. If you think you need more, please don't hesitate. Do send another question by, and we can try to address it. Next one, please, Sharon.
Okay, so I'm going to take direction from the poster behind you of the Big Bang and ask you a question on why were we created? And then the second part of that is, are there any other planets in the universe where there are imams or peers, and how is it over there? Is there a similar race? So that's a very loaded question, so I'll let you do that.
In all honesty, this question, I mean, is a fantastic question. And the thing is that in the past, I have given certain fragments of the responses because I am in the process of putting together the facts, particularly from the Quran, the Farmans, and the Ginans, about the whole notion of creation. And I am trying to tally it up with the current understanding of the notion of creation. So that definitely is going to be a series, because we are looking at not only the creation of the universe, we are also looking at the creation of life forms into this universe. And the question, I think, is so broad that we can even go before creation and also think what's going to happen at the end of this creation. And simply to add something, because you mentioned the Big Bang, Sharon, that the universe in which we live in today, which is estimated, I should say guesstimated, to be 13.8 billion years old. If you look at all the material that exists in the universe, meaning all the galaxies and all the other forms of celestial bodies that are out there, it only constitutes about 5% of the universe that we know. The known universe, known to us from where we are, is just 5%. The other 95% is split between, not equally, but is split between dark energy and dark matter. Dark matter is about 26% and dark energy about 69%. Now, it's called dark because no scientist yet knows what that dark energy is and what the dark matter is. So it would be interesting to look at the various verses in the Quran about creation of the cosmos, the physical cosmos, the creation of the earth within that physical cosmos, and then within the earth and in the earth, the creations of the various life forms, if you like, the origin of life. It's such an interesting area, but even to give this in an introduction would probably take me 45 minutes to an hour just to give you the introduction, just to whet your appetite to this topic. So just let me take up the question by itself. And the question, sorry, Sharon, I lost my train of thought about the question itself. So I know the second one was to do with, are there planets with other life forms, and is the Imam and the peers there? So let me address that first, then we'll come back to that first one. In our Ginans, including the hadiths of the Holy Prophet, including the teachings of our Da'is, and including in many of the mystical literature. First of all, there is a confirmation, including the Farman, that there are 18,000 worlds beyond the physical earth. What is the constitution of those worlds and how those worlds exist and how those worlds are sustained and maintained? So that is a question that is related to whether the Imam is present in those worlds. Let me tell you emphatically, unambiguously, let me tell you with 110% certainty and confidence, based on the teachings of our holy Imams and the Peers, each one of those 18,000 worlds is sustained, maintained, and ordained by the Imam of the time. Please say salawat, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Yes, the Imam is present there. Remember, if you are seeking to understand that, let me just tell you the connection. The connection is everything emanates and has come from the source of the Nur. And the Nur is what sustains the whole creation and cosmos. On earth, that Nur is the Imam. It is his Nur. And it is his Nur, according to the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who said, if the earth was without the Imam, the whole earth with its population would perish instantly. By extension, the whole cosmos would perish, would be destroyed instantly. One farman of the Imam says, it's a farman made in Madagascar in 1946. Our beloved Imam said, do you know who is the cause of creation? And the Imam answers, it is the Imam who is the cause of creation. And if the Imam so wished, if the Imam so desired, in a blink of an eye, he can pulverize this creation and recreate it again. This is why we emphasize the notion that it is the Nur of Maula Bapa, which is the Nur of Allah, that is always, always, always in every split nano microsecond that sustains every single thing. Even if you think about every single fundamental particles that we know in science today, it is the Nur that sustains it. Every single atom, every single molecule is sustained by the Holy Nur. Hence, you cannot be outside the context of the Nur to think about whether the Imam is present in any other location in the context of his creation. Remember, this is his creation. Therefore, it's totally logical to come to the conclusion, if it is his creation, then he is present in all of those creations. Now, by extension to the question, let me say this also. In a different cosmological model, our holy peers have given us an explanation that the whole cosmos is actually defined in 14 different cosmic spheres. So there are 14 layers, if you like, but there are 14 different cosmic spheres. And within the context of those 14 different cosmic spheres, the Earth is in the seventh. So if you take from the higher to the lowest, the Earth is in the seventh layer, group of layer, and below the Earth there are 6 more that makes up the 7th Earth. Now, why am I saying that to you? Because if you read many of the passages of the Quran, which I will come later on, inshallah, if Maula Bapa wills it, there are 7 heavens and 7 earth. That's what the Quran says. Even if you take it literally, 7 heavens and 7 earth. Often it says there are 7 heaven and the earth and 7 like it. So what are these 7 earths? Have you ever found geographers, or have you ever found geophysicists or astronomers to say, we have 6 more earths? What is the significance of that? And there are many places in the Quran this is referred to. Even in our Ginan, it says, Sat Jameen, Sat Asman, 7 heaven, 7 earth. Just here, I can tell you, the amount of science in the Ginans is incredible. And it is such a pity that we haven't gotten to those levels of extrapolating and bringing them to our knowledge today in the context of our modern astronomical, astrophysical, geophysical, and other forms of sciences. Including, if I can just throw this piece in, when we are speaking about the origin of life. And let me tell you this, scientists today have absolutely no clue how the origin of life began on Earth. There are all kinds of theories there, even going to the level of trying to replicate the origins of life by using the elements and knowledge of synthetic chemistry. And let me tell you, even within the scheme of the various elements in synthetic chemistry, starting with the 1950s, when the basic experiments were trying to replicate the original condition when it was speculated when Earth might have produced the origin of life, nothing but a few proteins, strands, some RNAs and DNA, some RNAs and DNAs in that elementary form, and its various strands were produced. But it was quite a remarkable experiment, but nothing has gone further from there in the last 40, 50 years. And I will have the opportunity to address that too, because we need to understand what we mean by the origin of life and what science is basically saying. So, in all those other words, the Noor is present. I know the question said, are there peers over there? Well, there is no reference that I know of that there are peers over there, because this is a concept here in this physical earth, how the Noor of the Imam has brought all these various revelations and the functions of the various prophets, 124,000 of them, and then how the Noor of the Holy Prophet has descended into those of the Holy Peers to give us the Ginan in our tariqah and in our interpretation. So I will leave it at that, and I hope that is some hints are given to you there about the presence of the Imam. Now there are other aspects that we know of, and perhaps one quick note, in that one Ginan called Partak Patvane Parakine, in that Ginan, the Sayyid says that the cosmos that is made of these 14 cosmic spheres, he uses the word Chawud Bhaman, mean these 14, the word Bhaman is difficult to translate in English, because in English the word world means one thing, universe means another thing, cosmos means another thing, so to speak, and the word Bhaman, in a sense, it's all encompassing. So there are these 14 creations, if you like, 14 levels of creation. He says, the one who created it, the Lord who brought these 14 cosmic spheres in manifestation and creation, and this Lord whom this creation belongs to, he is manifest and present here on earth. And of course, the reference is to the Imams and the Imam of the time, please say Salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Did I answer that question or did I miss a part of it?
You answered both parts.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So the next question, we know the power of salawat. A question that came in is salawat more powerful at midnight or before sitting in bandagi?
Before I go into that one, Sharon, did I answer the question why we were created? I think you had mentioned that.
I think you touched it, and we had mentioned that it would probably require a much larger.
Oh, I see. That's why. But perhaps I'll just add a footnote to what I've said, because I found one farman of the Imam. It's a short one, and then hopefully it will answer that question more directly. You know that in the past I have always quoted you this hadith about creation. Excuse me. And this hadith about hadith al-Qudusi, which means that Allah spoke directly using the Holy Prophet's tongue and to proclaim a certain message. And one of those hadiths was that, O Muhammad, if not for you, if not for thy sake, we would not have created this world. This means the Holy Pir says that all was created. Now, the person who asked the question about why were we created, I want to make sure that you'll remain focused on the notion of creation here, and then why we were created is coming in a minute. So look at the creation first. That this means all was created and came into existence only for thy sake, meaning for the sake of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then in another place, meaning into another hadith of the same category, Qudusi, it is mentioned, if there were no Ali, we would not have created thee, Muhammad. Now, I have explained it in the past, so I'm not going deeper into it, but simply to say the nur of Prophet Muhammad, as Prophet Muhammad says, I am from the nur of Ali. And the first thing Allah created was my nur. And from my nur, the whole creation came into existence. So our Holy Pir is explained to us. He says that thus the purpose, thus the creation of the world, follow the word creation, thus the creation of the world, the sending of the prophets, the revelations of the sacred books, all of these were intended in order that humanity could know him, about whom we have spoken through every prophet, and who became manifested at the time of Muhammad. Please say salawat. And you know this part, and you know this passage, it is in reference to the notion that this was the declaration of Hazrat Ali sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the first holy Imam, and the nur, which was to be recognized as that manifestation. So you can imagine how far this goes back. At the same time, having said this, I would like you to connect that information given by the peers to this farman given by Imam Shah Mustansir Billah alayhi salam. And look what our beloved Imam says. He says, God the All-High says, and I quote, I have created the world and man so that he may remember me, keeping my name on tongue and in his heart, appealing to me. So I'll reread this. God the All-High says, I have created the world and created man so that he may remember me, keeping my name on tongue and in his heart, appealing to me, unquote. To this, you will remember the hadith another hadith al-Qudusi that says that I was a hidden treasure. I brought creation and mankind into existence so that they may gain knowledge about me. And then there is the message of Maulana Hazrat Imam, our beloved present Imam, who says, he says, Allah says, man is his greatest creation. What makes the greatest creation different from others? What is it? The intellect, nothing else. Now, you can see why I said it requires time to elaborate on all of these, and inshallah we will do it. But you can see, if you are looking for the specific answer, why were we created? So beginning with that message was the recognition of the Imam, the holy Imamate. That was the purpose of creation, why all the prophets came, why all the books were revealed, and so on. Secondly, on top of that, was to know that, because the Farman says that we were created to gain knowledge about him. Why do we need to get knowledge about him? Because gaining knowledge about him who brought us into existence so that we may know him. Look at the connection here. Where is that knowledge? That knowledge is in the holy Farmans, in the holy Ginans, it is in our Qasidas, it is in the Masnavis. And this knowledge, this high spiritual knowledge, is intended in order that we may know him. Do you remember the meaning of the word Pir our beloved Imam gave? He said it is the holy Pir, it is the Pir who are the highest in creations, who explains to us who the Imam is. Do you see the connection with that hadith, that I created you so that you may obtain knowledge about me? And then the last Farman I quoted, that he created us and the world so we may remember him, keeping his name in our tongue and heart. Do you see the direct connection? Whose name? The name of the Imam of the time. Please say Salawat Allah Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Because the inner secret of this creation is, in the name of the holy Imam of the time, in the name of the Imam is contained all the attributes of the Supreme Being. All the attributes of the Nur is contained in that name. And the human being, according to the Farman, being the highest in creation, to him is revealed and are revealed these names, not to any other. And this is a Quranic confirmation. So here is, if I may say, the real tip of the iceberg about why we were created, in direct reference to the hadith and to some of the messages our beloved Imam gave us. Next one, Sharon.
Thank you for that. So one of the questions that I had asked, I'll just circle it back. Salawat being powerful, is there a more potent time to say it, for example, at midnight or before Bandagi?
You know, you can say the Holy Salawat at any time of the day or the night that you have the opportunity to say it. And let me say two things about it. One thing is important to bear is always, always, always the most precious, illuminated and holy guidance of the Imam in terms of our practice. And in the Farman that our beloved Imam had made many years back, he says, when you come to Jamaat Khana, so this is in reference to our attendance in Jamaat Khana, when you come to Jamaat Khana, recite as many salawat as you can. And remember, in my lecture on prayer as a cosmic force in creation, as a force in creation, in this section of the salawat, I mentioned to you that there are 5 amazing gifts of blessing our beloved Imam has bestowed upon us for every salawat. And you know what they are, just very quickly, that by reciting the salawat, now remember you are in Jamaat Khana and you are saying the salawat in accordance with the farman, that Imam says, say as many salawat as you can when you are in Jamaat Khana. So first of all, the Imam says, your strength of faith, meaning your Iman, will be strengthened, will increase. Secondly, your enemies will be vanquished and eliminated or destroyed. Thirdly, your sins will be forgiven. Fourthly, you will be given paradise. And fifthly, you will be the beneficiary of the Imam's holy didar. Please say salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. So, these 5 benefits are given. So, the notion of potency is related to farman, number 1. So, if you are able to go to Jamaat Khana, and whenever you go to Jamaat Khana, based on this holy guidance and blessings of the Imam, recite as many salawat as you can in Jamaat Khana. And that certainly, I think, answers the notion of potency, because you know what Jamaat Khana is. Needless to repeat it to you. It is the house of Nur, where the Nur is present. Another aspect, and I'm just going to paraphrase this event. It was during the time of our beloved 47th Imam, Imam Aga Ali Shah Babab sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So one day he asked a highly elevated, highly respected, and highly valued leader of the Jamaat. I'm not giving his name necessarily because that's not the focus. And some of you may know because this event is recorded in history. And the Imam, because this individual was so elevated and so well respected, and he actually worked for the Imam in many different aspects, particularly religious aspect. One day, our beloved 47th Imam came to one of the Jamaat Khanas in Mumbai and asked this individual and said to him, I want you to go and look outside the window what is happening. So, following the command of the Imam, out he went, looked outside the window, and what does he see? He sees that it's raining. And you know, when it rains in a place like India, it's not just simple droplets. Especially in times of the monsoon, you know what that word means. He came back and he said to the Holy Imam, he said, Khudawand, it is raining. So the Imam said to him, go back and count how many drops of rain are coming and come and tell me. He obeyed the farman, went outside by the window of Jamaat Khana, stood there for a while, looked at the sky, and saw all those drops of rain coming by. And of course, no human being can count droplets of rain like that. He came back to the Holy Imam and said to the Imam, my Lord Khudawand, only you know, Khudawand, how many drops of rain are coming down. We have no capability to know. Mola Bapa told him to sit down. And then Mola Bapa declared, he said to him, announce and tell the Jamaat that when you say salawat upon me, when you say salawat, all those drops of rain that you see are the benefits, they are the rewards, they are the blessings that come to you. Now, somewhere in the story, because there are a couple of variations, it says if you say one salawat or two salawat or three salawat, but after you've said a third salawat, it's like an infinite amount of blessing that comes to you. So don't look at it numerically. I'd like you to think about it spiritually. Spiritually. Because you see, this is a physical symbol, but look at the blessings of reciting salawat. And in talking about the potency, whether the salawat is more powerful at which time, except in the case of the farman that our beloved Imam made. Remember the salawat that we say when our holy Imam visits Jamaat Khana for a didar and a mulaqat. So I will leave it at that because in my lecture on prayers, I have said quite a few things. But again, you are welcome because salawat is a huge subject. There are many things that I didn't say. In the future, when I take up the subject of other prayers, I will say so. Next, Sharon.
Okay, we're gonna have our next question is, can you talk a little bit about our perspective on gays and lesbians within our faith view?
Okay. Well, you know, it is really important always, and it is paramount in the interpretation of in our tariqah, and I'm being very specific, because Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah alayhi salam has mentioned to us, and even Maulana Hazim has mentioned to us, that the Holy Prophet had commanded that we should be children of Ibnul Waqt. Ibnul Waqt means children of the time, meaning the faith that we understand, the faith that we practice should always be in accordance with the times in which we live in, so that the faith itself is practiced in adaptation to the culture, the society, the environment, the ecology in which we live in, so that we are in harmony with our environment, our ecology, and our prospects and perspective in which the faith is applied and practiced. And you know very well, everyone knows that in our tariqah, only and only the Imam of the time has the authority, the power, and the ability to give us direction in the practice, where we, based on the teachings of Islam, when we say Islam means we are submitted to the holy farmans of the Imam in our practice, because it is the interpretation, meaning the talim and the tawil that the Imam gives us for our practice. So I want you to bear this background in mind. Why am I giving you this background? I'm giving you this background because I would like anyone who are thinking about the notion of gays and lesbians in our society not to pass judgment. This is key, not to pass judgment. And why am I saying that? So I'm saying that because the first thing I would like to mention, that even though in our current society, because of its permissiveness or openness and various reasons that are now part of the law, that allows people of this particular sexual orientation to express their sexuality in the way that they are, this is not new. It may have been that in earlier societies, these tendencies were not really recognized in the way they are recognized in the 20th and 21st century, but they were condemned in those earlier societies, including, of course, many Muslim societies and the interpretation they give to this type of tendencies, even to the point of condemning people who express their orientation in this way to be totally against the practice of the faith. So these tendencies and, if you like, these forms of sexual orientation have always existed from the beginning when human society came into being. This isn't something that suddenly was created in the 20th or 21st century. Now, having said that, let me add that there are many things in the practice of the faith that are not legislated, and I hope you understand the word legislation. At the level of the Sharia, there may be legislation that speaks to this kind of sexual orientation in a very negative way. And there are legislation, meaning laws that are passed and interpreted and reinterpreted according to whoever those people think that they can interpret the law. So that is their point of view, and that is the way they think that it should be interpreted. And what do they do in that interpretation? They're purely looking at the notion of this form of sexual interpretation as the activity that happens through the human body. So they do not go to the level of the spirit or the level of the soul, if you like, because the Sharia is not particularly concerned at that notion. Though I'm not saying they don't talk about it, they do, but it's not the point of focus. Now, in contrast, at the level of the spirit, at the level of the tariqah, and further at the haqiqat, it is the spirit that comes into play. It doesn't mean the body is disconnected. No, the body-mind is not disconnected. But at the level of the haqiqat, beginning with the springboard of the tariqah, there is no legislation in everything the human being does. That is where the human being is been given the intellect to exercise it, and based on the practice and interpretation given at that time, he or she will apply the interpretation based on their intellect to the conditions of their lives and conditions of their being in the society in which they live. Remember what our beloved Imam says, that freedom is not a license. Freedom is not a license. Now, we live in a very free society. So, my response to the question is, no one has a right to judge anyone's sexual orientation, whether they are gay or lesbian, and whether they are of a different articulation or expression. And when I say expression, I mean exactly that, because there are other expressions there. And these other expressions, including gays and lesbians, they are expressions that are there. No one can deny them. Nobody has the right to condemn them, because the only judge about human activity and human action and human spirit is Allah Himself. Only Allah is the judge, no one else. And so if society has taken this turn, and if there are individuals, due to their function of being those individuals, and let me explain that, you have to understand, people don't necessarily kind of become gays or lesbian. There are inner forces, call them forces of the spirit if you like, that drives them, like any other human being, drives them to be who they are. And they are human beings like you and I. They are not any different. if science is expressing a certain biological determination and differences in certain aspect of cerebral function and this and that, it's purely a biological analysis, followed by some psychological explanation. But that does not make them any lesser than who they are, than any traditional man-woman relationship. So, as I'm saying, my point of view and my understanding of the perspective is this may be considered by many a new phenomena, if you can put it that way, but it is not new. It has been in society, is more open now than ever, will be more so open in times to come, and we need to be able to understand, and we need to be able to accommodate that that openness is there, and we are not the judge of their action or of their orientation in spirit in how gays and lesbians articulate their sexual orientation. This is their personal wish, private wish. It is what society allows them. And in our tariqah, we will not pass judgment on any human being one way or the other.
Thank you for that. The next question before we open up the floor is, we understand that we are soul. Can you differentiate between the terms Ruh, Atma, and Jeev?
Yes. This is basically different languages. Look, when you say the word Ruh, it's an Arabic word. And if you were looking the same word, Ruh, that is in Arabic, into Sanskrit, and many other languages that come from Sanskrit, it's called Atma. So it's exactly the same thing. We are speaking about the human spirit as Ruh, and or in that language, Atma, or if you like, in English language, the correct word would be the word from the Greek or Latin spiritus, meaning spirit. So the human spirit, we use the word interchangeably, soul and so on. Now, where does the word Jeev comes from? Sometimes in colloquial language, we refer to the soul or to the spirit as Jeev. But technically, Jeev is a different thing. So what is the Jeev? The Jeev is, if you were to compare in language, Jeev in Sanskrit is the word nafs in Persian or Arabic. And this Jeev and this nafs is an expression of the spirit at the level of the human body. So let me explain. The only real substance in the human being is the soul. It's the soul that is the master of everything. Everything comes from the soul. But when that soul enters the body, the soul begins to adapt material tendencies. Because remember, entering the body means being into the physical world. And the instrument, the mechanism that the spirit is using to express itself in the material world is the mind. And the mind, if you like, is like the software, and the body is like the hardware. But this software requires information on it that requires power, which is the spirit. The analogy is not perfect, but I think you will understand it. So when this software accumulates information through the 5 senses of the body, because it is linked to the body, that's why we call it the mind-body relationship of the mind-body complex. Through the 5 senses, the conscious mind absorbs all this information and data that comes through the sensory experiences, they get collected into the conscious mind, and the activity of this conscious mind based on the sensory experiences creates a certain database which eventually will, as the time goes by, shift into the subconscious, because remember, we have the conscious mind and we have the subconscious mind, and the subconscious is hidden. When we are awake, meaning in the waking state, only the conscious mind is active. So Jeev actually means that part of our being that has collected all this information, conscious and then living into the subconscious. And remember, the subconscious will contain all the experiences that has been collected in this particular life, plus what you brought from the previous life, which you may or may not know, but it is there. And in one of the lectures I gave, From Duality to Unity, I explained very briefly some of the functions that we carry out during the conscious state of our being are no longer available to us during the subconscious phase. So the Jeev is this conglomeration. It is the coming together of all these experiences, past and present, that makes up this body of action and reaction at this level, which is fueled by the spirit, that we call it Jeev. So in contrast, to give you the connection, the soul, or if you like, the spirit, is always pure. It's always pure. But the tendencies generated by the body-mind, which the spirit adopts, remember, the spirit adopts these tendencies. It is then identified as Jeev. And it is the Jeev that makes you hungry, angry, thirsty, react in this way or that way, that creates all these tendencies of anger, lust, jealousy, attraction, positive attraction, negative attraction, and the result thereof. And then when we pray for forgiveness, it is the Jeev that we're asking forgiveness of, because it is there all that stuff is gotten together. So we try to purify the Jeev in order to make sure the soul eventually gets liberated. Now, in one of my very near future lecture, I mean very close, I will be taking back this subject in greater detail, because I have received so many questions about people asking me about the functions of the mind, thoughts, how thoughts are controlled, what thoughts do to us, where these thoughts actually come from. Why do people get all these thoughts? Where are they generated from? And how are they related to the actual functions of the mind? And how is the mind actually coming into play with all of this? So I decided, and I said, anyone based with some feedback I received, that maybe it would be a good subject to take, and then we can tie it in to see how in our own mystical scriptures the whole notion of the mind is explained. So I will leave it at that.
Wonderful, thank you. So if it's okay with you, maybe we can take some questions from those who are on the Zoom call.
Yes.
And so what we ask you to do is use the raise hand feature, and this icon can be found under the participant heading on your screen. So if anyone has a question they would like to ask Dr. H, we ask you to use the raise hand feature. If you can unmute, and I can put you. Go ahead, Dilshan.
Okay, Yali Madat. So my question is, what is Jivro then? You know, in Ashaji, there is a lot of verses where it's referring to Jivro.
Yes, it is the same word, Jiv.
Oh, okay.
Exactly the same word. And as I explained, many places in the Ginani says Jivaro Chute. So it is referring symbolically to the liberation of the soul, but through the purification of the jiv. To put it simply, when jiv becomes one with the soul, that is the state of liberation. But it is what I explain about jiv. Literally, jiv or jivro means life force.
Okay, Dr. H, I'm going to go to the next question.
Yeah, limited missionary sahib.
Mulali Madat.
Missionary sahib, you just talked about 14,000 Brahman. So, मेरा question ये है कि our human body is made of 5 elements of this universe, right?
Yes.
Fire, water. So all that 14,000 Brahman is within us, in Batin way.
Yes.
So when we say Rabbal Alamin in our dua, in which context we are saying Rabbal Alamin, in that Batini meaning or the physical Brahman? And as we know that Pir Hassan Kabir Din Allahumma salli ala Muhammadi wa ali Muhammad is a Pir of Anant Karod. So we don't have Anant Karod Ismailis. So what I am thinking that in our body we have particles of each human being. We are accumulation of cells. So we have each human body cells have the Brahman, means in Brahman everything comes. We human being, animals, trees and everything. So in that sense, the Pir Hassan Kabir Din Anantna Pir is in that sense or in other sense? I'm confused now.
Yes. Now you've asked many different things tied together. So let me see if I can address them logically for you so you can hopefully try to make the difference. First of all, the figure I quoted was 18,000. So not 14,000, but 18,000 worlds. And remember, as I said, this of course refers to the physical worlds. Now, I gave you another meaning, interpretation, whereby the Quran speaks about 7 heavens and 7 earth. But that doesn't matter. But let's address where this thing fits in within the human being, as you said. So the way to look at it is this. You're absolutely right. All those Brahmans, if I can use your word, meaning all these worlds or all these creations are out there, whether they are 18,000 or whether they are the 14 cosmic spheres or whether they are the 16 layers or whatever other cosmology is used to explain it. The key point is this. You have often heard said that inside the human being is the mystery of all of that creation. Because physically speaking, as I said earlier on, when Sharon mentioned the Big Bang, I said that we only know even 5% of the universe in front of us. And so even the physical universe is very limited to us. So your question is a very good one. And let me give you a direct answer. The direct answer is this. Until the human being does not recognize and come to know himself. Remember what Hazrat Ali said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Mullah Murtaza Ali said, he who knows himself knows God. Now the whole purpose in our tariqah is to go into that path to allow you to know yourself. And once you know yourself, meaning that everything becomes one with your spirit inside of you. Meaning until, and be very understanding or try to understand what I'm saying to you here, because I will not be able to go into deeper elaboration and you will know why. Until you do not succeed in taking your soul out of the body, everything will remain blocked. Everything will remain in a state of limitation. So in our practice, when you are able, with the grace of Mola Bapa, with the intervention of Mola Bapa, with the blessings of Mola Bapa, when Mola Bapa gives that grace, and there is his permission, and there is his rahmat, when this ruh or atma comes out of the body, then all these things about this 18,000 alam, this Rabbul Alamin, Lord of creations in plural, everything will become in perspective, and you will come to know all these mysteries from the inner universe. So this inner universe is actually the correspondence of whatever it is in the outer universe, known or unknown. But we can come to know all of them through our internal search. And in our practice, the idea is of the illumination and elevation of our ruh or atma. And that can happen strictly, and I mean very strictly, if you follow the path Mola Bapa has indicated. So that is the solution to that whole problem. Now, other explanation I will give later.
So we're going to try getting as many questions in. So everyone, we have an order. We're trying to accommodate everybody. One question we had, Dr. H, in the chat was, if dua is recited at a time other than the prescribed time, does it lose its benefit?
No. There is a reason to recite dua at a prescribed time. When we say congregational prayer in Khane, it is because of a prescribed time. What happens is this: when people get together to recite dua in Jamaat Khana, I'm talking specifically, there is this notion of what we call mass prayer. And this has been explained in many different ways. In the hadith of the Prophet, there are certain verses that refers to congregation in the Quran, also in the Ginan with the context of Gat Jamaat. And it says, when you come into Gat Jamaat, the whole prayer of the Gat Jamaat becomes accepted because of the power of the Gat Jamaat. So Mola Bapa himself allows the Jamaat to have a certain level of power, and Mukhi Kamani Sahib, Mukyani Kamani Sahibas are the ones who represent Mola Bapa's authority. So that combination creates a channel whereby the dua we say in Jamaat Khana and we supplicate through the authority of the Imam, Mola Bapa accepts that dua. So that is the context of saying prayers in congregation in the place where Mola Bapa has allowed us. Remember, congregation means not any place. It means where Mola Bapa has allowed congregation to take place. And mostly and specifically it is Jamaat Khana. Now, let's say there is no Jamaat Khana, or maybe you cannot go to Jamaat Khana, or unable to go to Jamaat Khana, but you still have to fulfill your dua. So the fact is this: you can say your dua. In fact, you must say your dua because it is a part of our religious duty and obligation. And we, in our supplication of personal dua, the same way that we do in Khane, we present our supplication to Mawla and we leave it to him to accept it. So the dua is accepted.
Thank you for addressing that.
Yali Madat.
Mulali Madat is one.
Thank you for taking one of those questions where she asked about gays and lesbian. So I have a older daughter, and kids nowadays wants to have a black and white answer. So based on our Quranic concept or our religious concept, where does it stand as an individual, not in terms of humanity, but in terms of these concepts, in terms of religion, you know? Like I know Christianity clearly doesn't allow it. There are a lot of religion who doesn't really allow it based on scriptures, but what is our stance as Ismaili Muslims? Can you?
Now, I want to be very direct with you. So remember, anything that is related to taking a stand in the name of the tariqah or in the name of our own religious practice, no one has the authority to declare a stand, because that is not the prerogative of the individual in the Jamaat at any one time. So having made that clear, let me say this to you. The one thing you can be sure, that no one in our tariqah and in our religious practice has the authority to judge, as I said in my explanation, whether individuals want to get together. In fact, I can tell you with 100% certainty, because I'm aware of many cases, for example, of 2 women got married, adopted a child. One of them got even was admitted into our tariqah after going through the admission process. So they got married, they have adopted a child, and they come to Jamaat Khana with a child. So this is direct experience, I'm telling you. This is not of a far-fetched story. And I know many cases like this, even of the reverse order. So I say to you, nowhere our tariqah is creating a discomfort for those who articulate their sexual orientation or attraction in that way. So you must be confident that our tariqah passes no judgment and leaves it to the individual intellect to understand and to use their akal and to use their ability to do so.
Thank you, Dr. HASSAM. HASSAM.
Yali Madat.
Mulali Madat Nasim.
Kim Cho. Majama.
Alhamdulillah. Shukran.
Actually, I was nowadays I have started reading that Anant Akhado. Like every day I'm reading 12 verses. So I came on 18th verses. You want me to repeat that whole verse? Or because I did understand only the 2 words inside that 99 crore ત્યાં જગસે મળશે 56 કરોડ મેઘાજી મહેંદી સા મેલા મળશે જાગે કિન્નર કરોડ 32 હરિ અનંત અનંત. So I wanted to, what is Meghaji and what is that Kinnar?
Yes, this is a very good question. Actually, it follows with one of the earlier questions. It was asked about the Anant Kador also in Ananta Karo about Pirasan Kabirin. So let me address that in this context. So you know, these names you gave me, the name of Jaksh, Megmara, Kinnar, and Devta. These are the life forms that existed in earlier cosmic cycles. For example, sorry, it's a big long thing, but I will try to summarize it. The one point of beginning is to consider the cosmic cycles known as Kalpa or Kalap. So each Kalap is 4,320,000,000 years. So there are 4 such Kalap. And the first Kalap was known as Jaila. The second Kalap, Faila. The third Kalap, Khalifa. The first Kalap was Jaila. The second Kalap was Faila. The third Kalap was Adja. And the fourth Kalap was Khalifa. Now, each one of these, as I said, is 4,320,000,000 years in duration. Now, in the first kalpa known as Jaila, in this kalpa, who are the souls that were salvated? They became asal mavasal. In other words, or will become asal mavasal when the time comes. Those souls, or if you like, the life form, like today we are in the human life form, and there is an angelic life form, and then there is a jinn life form. But in that cosmic cycle, there was a life form that was known as Jaksh. And this Jaksh, 990 million, Navanu crore, got salvated. And then there was a long process that took to the second kalpa. And during that second kalpa, which lasted the same duration, there was the second form of life form that was known as Megmaras. And those Megmaras, there were, according to the Ginan, even what you recited, Chapan crore, 160 million Megmaras received salvation. Then came the third cycle, or the third cosmic cycle, that was known as Adja. And in Adja, the life form was known as Kinnar. And there were 32 crore Kinnar got salvated, meaning 320 million Kinnar, that particular life form, got salvation into that third cycle. Now, in the fourth one, which is Khalifa Kalpa, this fourth Kalpa, also lasted the same duration, 4,320,000,000 years. But this cosmic cycle, something strange happened into it. When this cosmic cycle ended, now remember, we are into that cosmic cycle, but you have to understand this, why the Ginan speaks the way it is. When this cosmic cycle ended, up to the time of Holy Pir Sadruddin, 32 crore devtas. Now devtas refers to these illuminated beings, we say devas or devtas, that, sorry, not 32, but 33 crore, 330 million devtas, which consisted of these angels and other life form, got salvated, including all the human forms that lived up to the time of Holy Pir Sadruddin. That's why Pir Sadruddin is known as the Pir of 33 crore Devta. Now what happens, this is something important to understand in the cosmic cycle that we are living. The period of the fourth Kalp or Kalpa came to an end. Now, what about all the souls that did not make it then? And in a sense, it was too bad. You didn't make it. Now you can go into a form of spiritual detention known as Ghor Andar. Meaning the soul is put into a detention of darkness for eternity until the Lord of all souls, meaning Mawla, meaning the Imam, releases them. But what happened is this. During the time of Pir Hassan Kabiruddin, because remember, Pir Sadruddin is the Pir of 33 crore Devta, 330 million Devtas. So Pir Hassan Kabiruddin supplicated and prayed to Imam Islam Shah at that time, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And remember, our peers, both peers, Pir Sadruddin and Pir Hassan Kabiruddin, in that marvelous Ginan called Allah Ek Hassam Sabuka, where in that Ginan it says that Nabi Muhammad Bujo Bhai To Tame Pamo Imam. It is in reference to the Noor of Nabuwat within the peers, explaining to us how to obtain and gain the recognition of the Holy Imam, which in the same Ginan, they give the recognition by using the name of the Imam of the time, and they say, Ale Ali Islam Shah Raja Allah Yehi Imam. And then they say, Bane Pir Sadruddin Keita Pir Hassan Kabiruddin. Bane Pir Hassan Kabiruddin Keita Pir Sadruddin. Two peers, meaning Holy Pir Sadruddin and his son, Holy Pir Hassan Kabiruddin, both peers are giving the testimonial and testimony as the bearer of the Noor, as the highest in creation. And they are testifying that knowing the Imam means that you recognize that Allah himself is the Imam. They are one. They are not two. Having given this recognition and having spoken for that recognition, Pir Hassan Kabiruddin sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed to the Imam and said to the Imam that the fourth kalpa, which is the kalpa called Khalifa, as I explained, has now come to an end. The cosmic cycle is ended. What about all these other souls that are remaining, and what about them? And the Lord said, what about them? They didn't make it. The law is these souls have to go into spiritual detention. Why? There were many deficiencies. And where is that deficiency written? Look into Anantakaro. There is a verse that says, I'm trying to remember the word, that particular verse. It says, Chatris Kror Pura Dharmi Shri Islam Shah ne Bhetia. Look, this is the name of the same Imam, right? And look what the Holy Pir says. This is an amazing, this is in reference to explaining the cosmology of the soul, okay? I'm giving you that context so you don't get, mixed up everywhere. So, Chatris Ashaji, Chatris Kror Shri Islam Shah ne Bhetia. Chatris Kror Pura Dharmi. I forgot that word. Look at the words, okay? This is so important for you to understand the question you asked. Chatris Kror Pura Dharmi Shri Islam Shah ne Bhetia. Let's stop right there. Who are these people? The Holy Pir says there were 360 million souls who were Pura Dharmi. Pura Dharmi means they were actually completely perfect in the practice of the faith. Now imagine what that perfection means. When the Pir said they were perfect, Pura Dharmi, completely devoted, Pura Dharmi. But then the Holy Pir continues and says, Chatris Kror Pura Dharmi Shri Islam Shah ne Bhetia. Dasond Kavar Jeev Dulavya Ane Chovis Chalia Ghor Andhar. Holy Pir Hassan Kabiruddin sallallahu alaihi wasallam says 360 million souls were in perfect harmony with their faith, but because of this one element of dasond, how many of them? 2/3, meaning 240 million were imperfect into the dasond. So what happened? they were sent to Gorandar, and 12 crore remained. And these are the 12 crore attributed to Holy Pir Sadruddin. You know, it says, Bad crore Pir Sadruddin. So these 120 million of Pir Sadruddin received salvation. Now, what about the other souls besides these? Because remember, these other souls, now the period was ended in what I have just explained. So Holy Pir Hasan Kabiruddin, through his supplication, which supplication? It's a long story, but you asked the question and let me be complete and I'll be very fast. Holy Pir Sadruddin, he had made ibadat, bangi, for 800,000 karan. I won't even go to the length of the time what a karan means. But Holy Pir Hasan Kabiruddin submitted his bangi and said to Imam Islam Shah, Sahi Allah, Allahumma salli Allah Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. He said to Imam Islam Shah, he said, Mawla, what will save these souls? And Imam said, well, they didn't make it. And the law is they have to go to Gorandar. And then the Holy Pir, now remember the Pir is the mother, right? And it's a source of that creation. And the Holy Pir says, Mawla, how about if I give my ibadat to save the souls? Because they didn't make it because of their ibadat. And the Imam says, okay, I'll accept it. In the act of acceptance, Holy Pir prayed to Mawla and said, but the period has ended. So the souls need to continue existing. So the Imam gave an extension to this time. And the extension of this time, this extension is called Fartai Vela. And we are now into the fourth period of the Jug, which we call Kal Jug, which is, and this Kal Jug is divided into two fractions. One that is the actual Kal Jug, and then the fraction below it, or tail of it, is called Fartai Vela. And Holy Hasan Pir Kabiruddin is the Pir of this Fartai Vela, who prayed to the Holy Imam so that you can get this extension, so that all those all those souls who are in Fartai Vela can get salvated. And this refers to the earlier question that in this Fartai Vela period, the Holy Pirs declare there is going to be countless souls who will be born. And these countless souls is known, Anant. Anant means countless, almost infinite, if you like. Not infinite in the sense that, there is no limitation, but infinite in contrast to known numbers. But the question was asked earlier, in this Anant, in this batch of countless souls, Pir Hasan Kabiruddin has made the prediction 48 crore, 39 crore will gain salvation. And then, because of these souls in Fartai Vela, the 48 crore souls, and Anantakaro Pir Hasan Kabiruddin mentions that, and he says, and he predicts that, he says, although the souls of Kal Jug, they are like sour milk, when you have cream, and when the cream is gone, the cream of the crop is gone, then you have let me reverse that. The butter that came out of that cream, so the butter is gone. Now the cream remains. Now you churn the cream, and now the cream is gone. And what is left? This buttermilk, if you like. And in the buttermilk, the buttermilk is pretty well empty. And so the peer says, well, I have been appointed to be the peer of this period, and my job as a peer is to show you the path back to the nur of the Imam. As a result of that, the holy peer composed this Ginan, Anantakaro, 500 verses, in showing us from the beginning to the end, when it will come, how all the souls will gain salvation. And he says, the souls that are in this period of Anantakaro, in the period of Fartaivela, which is the part of Kaljug, that says that even though they are empty of credit, but they will be considered highly elevated when the time comes. And you know why? Because of the ibadat, their ibadat, the bangi, the peer gave us to make us credible and creditable. So 48 crore will be salvated. And because of the souls of Kaljug that became elevated in this, remember this period of time we are living in is a treacherous period. There is deceits and cheating and lying and people doing all kind of atrocities that you cannot even imagine and count. And we have a Ginan that exists that gives us details about how this treacherous period is and how careful we need to be. And all of this because people can easily lose their faith if they do not take care and if they do not understand. And this is what is happening. I'm not saying about our Jamaat, I'm saying generally speaking that less and less people are turning to some other variation and expression of spirituality, but have lost connection with their own faith. And as a result of losing connection with their own center and their own faith, they are neither here nor there. So, therefore, this care is given. But because of the souls of Kaljug being so highly elevated, when the time comes, and that means we have to do our own job, the other souls that remain will also benefit from that. So here is a very short précis of what those words meant in terms of these various life forms, and then the physical life forms, and then where we are at. And now there's a lot remaining in the background, but that is where it is. I hope that gave you some sense of where we are.
So Dr. H, keeping in mind time, it's
Yes.
10 o'clock on the Pacific coast. Would you like to take one or two more questions and then we can wrap it up?
Yes, if the listeners are there, and by all means, I think maybe a couple, and then we can certainly wrap up.
I'll try to pick a shorter answer one so that way we can wrap up and people can wake up for Bandagi time.
Yes, absolutely.
One question that we had on the topic of Bandagi is, if someone cannot wake up because they're elderly for Bandagi time, is it okay to recite Bol outside of the 4 to 5 time?
Well, if there are some handicap, and I think we are giving an extended interpretation to Maulana Bapa's Farman. He said there are people sometimes have a limitation because of medication, age, and so on. Yes, Maulana Bapa has given us permission to say, but remember that it is a very sharp line that one should not cross, because one cannot use any such excuses not to do ibadat at a time Maulana Bapa said we should do it. So in very exceptional circumstances, when someone cannot do their ibadat because some people take medication and then it kind of really knocks them up, and some people have certain health and sleep and other reasons, yes, when they wake up and they need to do their ibadat, and they certainly can do it and ask Maulana Bapa and supplicate Maulana Bapa to accept it.
Wonderful, thank you for that. Another question we had was, someone said their family in Zanzibar were in the presence of Sultan Muhammad Shah, where he had used the word jinn. Can you define the word jinn, and if there is anything as a being that might not be of benevolence?
So in the Quran, 3 types of life forms are mentioned in these contexts, and that is, there is the angels. They are created out of light, meaning nur. There are jinns that are created out of fire, and there are human beings created out of clay. So there is a whole community of life forms that are known as jinns. And the Imam is the Lord of all life forms, known and unknown, including angels, including jinns, including the human form. And so it is a life form, and these genes, there are good ones and bad ones. And the bad ones can do many different things. For example, they can take forms of, they can actually create a basis for possession. When a person gets possessed by a certain spiritual force, and by and large it is always a jinn, and there is a reason when that happens. And then there is the process of exorcism that exists to be able to do that. And jinns also, by virtue of their way they are, like I said, there are good ones and bad ones, they can take different forms. They can take the form of snakes, they can take the form of donkeys, they can take the form of other animals. And sometimes we see in mystical literature that there may be places in the world where certain treasures of this world are kept hidden from mankind for a reason best known to the divine. And mankind, being the greedy one, that nothing is ever enough, when they go and look for these treasures, or sometimes get a whiff that, oh, there must be a treasure there. These treasures, according to many of these mystical sayings, these treasures are guarded by jinns that are in the snake, of vicious snakes. And there are like thousands of them in and around there, because they've been ordered by the divine. And these are the good ones to take that form to protect those treasures. I'm just giving that on the basis of just some explanation. So I don't know the context Imam Sultan Muhammad Shah may have mentioned to this family, but if they're looking for the word jinn, then this is what it is.
Thank you for that. Anyone who has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and we will get to them in the future sessions so that we are fair and also cognizant of time. Thank you, Dr. H, for sharing your wisdom. We're always amazed at your depth and wealth of knowledge. Thank you to everyone that joined tonight. We had up to 227, so definitely great to see. If we can ask you for some prayers, Dr. H, before we wrap up.
I especially pray to Mawla in supplication. May Mawla Bapa always bless all of you with Hakikati Samaj. May Mawla Bapa make you strong in your faith and in your dasan. May Mawla Bapa give you the strength to go through these challenging times. May Mawla Bapa's hand be upon you to guide you, to protect you, to keep you safe, to give you happiness. May Mawla Bapa's presence always be felt. May Mawla's love and compassion be upon all of you. May Mawla bless you with barakat, spiritually and materially. May you never have calamities to go through. And if there are, with Mawla's name and blessings, may those calamities disappear and never come back. These are Maula's words. May Maula keep you all in the path of Satpant, Sirat al-Mustaqim, and the path of Noor. May Maula Bapa accept your prayers, your ibadat. May Maula Bapa keep you in his Noor. And whatever wishes you have, spiritually, materially, may Maula Bapa fulfill them to the fullest, fast and in every way. And to the hosts and co-hosts today, in humility, my special supplication to Maula, Maula bless you for your contribution, your support, and all that you do for the members of the Jamaat and those who come to listen. And for the younger crowd, for the youth, may Maula enlighten you in your education. May He make the path easy for you for success. And may you succeed in your education in whatever level your education level is. And may you be successful in your examination. And may you are able to overcome through this challenging time. And may your education become a source of spiritual and material barakat and enlightenment. And Maula bless everyone with Zahiri and Batini Dida. Ameen.
Ameen.
Thank you so much. We look forward to everyone joining future sessions. We will call it a night. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you again, Sharon, for your time, and everyone else too. Thank you. Mola bless everyone.
Thank you.